My name is Jane Wilson. I'm the Chief Executive of the Chartered Institute of Public Relations.
Hello, I'm Sandy Scott, the Chief Executive of the Chartered Insurance Institute.
In recent years, we've really looked at what drives people to membership and what are the factors that would make people consider joining the Chartered Institute of Public Relations. And the key things that absolutely stand out are professional development and accountability, because there's no licence to operate. So the two big strategic initiatives that we've done in the last 2 to 3 years, first of all, we took the time served element away from membership. We put the focus firmly on professional development by bringing everyone who practices public relations into membership, where previously you had to wait 10 years in practice. And so we opened up membership to everyone and put the focus firmly on becoming an accredited practitioner or a chartered practitioner through professional development. So with a focus firmly on professional development, we also looked at our pricing structure. There was a lot of parity between the prices that members and non-members paid. And the balance for our professional development products and service was actually 60% non-members and 40% members. So we changed the pricing structure to really give members a benefit when they're doing our courses or workshops. So the prices were significantly less, and alongside that introduced a whole series of free webinars, so that every time someone joined up to membership, straight away they were getting about £700 worth of free training online just for becoming a member. So we really put our money where our mouth was in terms of making professional development accessible, making it affordable, and making it at the heart of our offer.
Well, we've implemented every strategy that we've had in each plan in the last 2 to 3 years. I can say that with certainty. We do a strategic plan every year, but they tend to run for 3-year periods. And in the last 2 years, our major strategic themes would have been around building on the profession. We had one strategy called the Aldermanbury Declaration, one about chartered status, one about evolving our professional standards board, so it is now completely independently led with a lay majority. We had a series of strategies around our members, particularly on continuous professional development, delivering CPD in a box around the country online, that sort of thing. We always have some international strategies, and certainly in the last 2 years, we had a strategy to break through in India, where we have been operating for many years, and indeed last year we ran nearly 1 million examinations in India. And we also had to rapidly decamp. This was perhaps not strategic, but lots of things blew up in Bahrain, where we operated and had people. And I remember they came out on the plane when the government decided all British citizens should leave Bahrain. We still operate very successfully in the Middle East, but that forced us to implement more quickly some strategic developments in Southeast Asia, and we moved that group of people to Kuala Lumpur. We also had operational strategies. We are implementing, and have been over the last 2 years, a completely new IT system for the whole organisation. We've had strategies around people, we always do, and their development, because we have IIP Gold accreditation.
So when we introduced the new membership structure, I was very new in post, so I had the luxury of being new and enthusiastic, and people expected things of me, so there was a sense of momentum already in place. But the way we went about it, we started with research first. We started with the reasons people wanted to join and the things that were important to our members. We looked at the economic landscape, and then we put together a case which said this is what we think the new membership structure should look like. And we worked through our committee system first. So we went to the professional development and the standing committees, presented to them, and made changes along the way based on the feedback that they gave us, and then we took it back to the board, and then finally we took it to the council for a formal vote and for approval. But of course by that time we had got round to all the council members because we had done consultation webinars over a period of about 2 months.
Well, it's my people who implement the initiatives, we have a strategic planning process, probably best to start with that. That begins towards the late summer with all the staff, team leaders, junior managers. Then there's some sessions with sort of middle and more senior management, and we tend to video or put those on DVD and take them away. When I take my director strategy group away in September for a couple of days, we do this process every year. I usually take a consultant, someone who is a specialist in strategic planning, really just to run the process and to make sure we stay focused. And the output of that will be a draft 3-year plan. We'll quickly get all the numbers done. That goes to our board in October. If the board approve it or want any changes, the final plan goes back to them in December, so we've got a plan for the following year. Then in January, when we do our performance and development review process for all staff, they will have put into their objectives in that at the beginning of the year the objectives that should link to the strategic themes that are in the plan all the way through the organisation. And then I will do kick-off sessions in January for all the staff, telling them what our objectives are for that year. And I'll go back actually and review progress with everyone in the organisation 3 times in the year after that. So that's how we run the process. How do we execute the strategies? Well, that's down entirely to our people. We don't use members or volunteers to either develop strategy or implement it.
When we make any changes at the Institute, there are a set of steps in place depending on the authority that's required to make that particular change. So operational changes I can make with my staff. Small changes in direction, policy decisions, some of those day-to-day things we can do it on the basis that we're sticking to the 3-year strategy. Changing the regulations, anything that affects the delivery of our Royal Charter, that absolutely has to go to Council. So I guess the obstacles were Council being used to making big decisions like that, and Council being used at their meetings to being consulted and to having big decisions to make. And I think historically these things were often done by a smaller group or were perhaps just done by the executive. So one of the obstacles was making Council aware of what the responsibilities were there, but also for me personally, being new and convincing people that I was doing this based on research and based on going out and listening to the members and not just a hunch that I had.
There are only 2 things that I think are crucial to successful, I hate the American word, execution. It is all about execution. And the 2 things that are crucial are money and people. Now, we've always taken the view that we needed to earn the money to pay for the strategies that we implement. We don't take sponsorship from anybody, for instance, because we feel that introduces conflicts of interest into the organisation. So you need to earn the money to pay for it, and then you need to have the people to execute it.
The CIPR board has about 12 people on it. 4 of those are the honorary officers of President, immediate past President and President-elect and Treasurer. And the remainder are directly elected from our council, up to about 6 people, and then we might co-opt 1 or 2. They're all volunteers, and the only member of staff on the board is me. So only the Chief Executive is the only staff member sitting on the board, and I do have a vote on board meetings and board matters, but I am responsible to them as the only member of staff. At the CIPR, the senior members of staff aren't on the board, and I think that's something that we should address, because I think having senior staff members on the board does make it much easier to implement strategy, does make it much easier for the board to get a more rounded picture of the view from the staff and not just one person. And also it's so much better for board continuity if a chief executive leaves. It's good if there have been senior staff members on the board with board experience so that internal appointments can be considered.
The Chartered Insurance Institute does have a board of directors. That is the governing body of the institute. There are only 2 executives on the board, myself and the finance director. We have voting rights. There are then 3 officers in terms of president, deputy president, immediate past president, to give some continuity in that sort of cadre. Those officers will need to be chief executives of or managing directors of a significant institution in the financial services industry. We then have 2 lay members who are elected through a Nolan compliant process. They are public interest members. We have 2 industry representatives. They are recruited through a nominations committee that is independently chaired, i.e. chaired by someone who's not a member. And they're there to represent the specific interests of employers. And then we have 3, I think that makes a total of 12, it might be 13, I can't remember. We have 3 who are elected via our representative council. So we have a board that's the governing body, and we have a representative council that's there to represent the interests of members. So those 3 will come from elections in that council.
In any chartered institute, there is a natural tension between paid staff and highly committed volunteers. There's a natural tension between volunteerism and commercialism, and then professional development too on top of that. So that is part of the rhythm and the nature of institute life. The way we tend to solve any issues that come up, and the way we also try to avoid them in the first place, is I encourage my staff to always see the member's point of view. We are here to serve the profession through our charter and also our members who fund the institute. So we take a member-centric approach. We try and put ourselves in the member's shoes first. And we try and encourage everyone to take the view of, with this issue, which outcome will be in the best interests of the members and the best interests of the profession. And that often leads to resolution, and people genuinely believe, actually, we're all trying to achieve the same thing. We might just be coming at it from different angles.
I'm not sure we've had many issues between staff and volunteers. I tried to say earlier, when you're executing strategy, it is done by staff. It is not done by volunteers. And I think you've got to be very careful today in member organisations to, if you start to use volunteers first to develop strategy, well, they need to be able to do that. If they don't have that experience and competence, you shouldn't put them in the position of embarrassing themselves. We mentioned the board earlier, and we have some elected membership represented on the board. Now, we're very ruthless about board performance, and if people are on the board and they don't perform, we remove them. So it is very much the culture of the CII that the executive develop the strategy, the board approves the strategy, and the executive then implement it. I'm not sure you can do it any other way in a way that is timely, that is cost effective, and that gets results in a reasonably quick fashion.
Well, it's a very competitive environment now for any chartered body, and I think competition comes in 2 key ways. First is competition from other providers, other institutes, other professional bodies who work in your space, or other institutes who may have a bleed into into the space that you occupy. And so we deal with those really by just making the products as relevant as they can be. My approach to competition is just be really good at what you do and really good at communicating the value of what you do. For the CIPR, that has reaped benefits, because in 2012 we saw membership admissions up 14% in a really tough marketplace, and that That's a surprise. We hope to get that, but not that soon, so that's great. But competition, I think, more fundamentally comes from outside the professional body space. I think the main competition comes in the reasons why people previously chose to join. Access to content, access to networks, influence in their profession or their personal sphere, and they can get all of those things pretty quickly and pretty cheaply and pretty easily from other places, particularly through digital platforms. So somebody can become an expert through social media. They can become known, they can get content through social media groups. You can put a call out on LinkedIn for a piece of research you're doing and actually perhaps get more feedback and more traction more quickly than you might be able to through an institute. So where there's no license to practice in public relations, for instance, I think those are the two areas of competition. We deal with the first by just being really good, and we deal with the second by being in that space ourselves. And we've absolutely led in social media. It's been a huge part of our strategy, allowing our natural networks and groups to link digitally and through social media. And we have the fortunate position that we can actually also lead on social media, so publishing books, the social media handbook for PR practitioners, having a social media panel, being experts in that area has hugely helped.
In our sector, we probably have 5 or 6 direct competitors. Maybe 8 years ago, one of those was as big as we are. We were. Today we are bigger than all of them put together, and then some considerable margin. I think if I was to say, how have we responded to competitive challenges? Well, we have won.
In the next 2 years, I think there are a number of leadership challenges. The biggest among those, I think, will be financial and economic challenges. I think most institutes may struggle to deliver the same level of services and products that their members have come to expect in an increasingly demanding and challenging economic environment. So I think many institutes may look to partnerships. I think those of us who are charter bodies particularly should look more at how we can work together to deliver benefits to our members. And I think the other big challenge will be providing everything to all members everywhere to give the same level of service to members regardless of where they are, because institutes do tend to be quite London-centric or South-East-centric. And so I think one of the big leadership challenges is for those who lead organisations, either as Director General or CEO or as President, to be out there, to be visible, to use every channel open to them, to be a voice for their profession, and to ensure that they use every channel open to them to ensure that all the members get all of the products and services of the Institute, regardless of where they are.
Well, all leaders, whatever organisations they're in at the moment, the macroeconomic environment is a challenge. It has to be probably the #1 on our risk register. Up till now we've managed that well, but heaven knows what's round the corner if something bad was to happen in Europe, for instance, or if something was to blow up in the Middle East in terms of geopolitical risk. So those are the big things on the risk register. I think leadership challenge is always about keeping the best people. The reason we've done very well is we've got some exceptionally good people, and one needs to develop them and retain them. So the economic environment and people, those are probably my main leadership challenges.
It's a very particular set of skills, I think, that are required today to be a leader of a professional body. I would put diplomacy right at the top, because you work for an organisation where the members own the Institute. Each and every individual member has a sense of ownership in the organisation and has a sense that you report to them, rightly so, and that you work for them, rightly so. So there is an awful lot of diplomacy, there's an awful lot of listening to different viewpoints, the ability to arbitrate, the ability to help people find resolution and to remind people of the common goal. So I think that's incredibly important. The other piece of advice would be to be incredibly well-rounded in terms of business, because these organisations are businesses. You do have to have strong financial management and control of your organisation. You also have to be an expert in human resources because you have teams to manage, and invariably institutes are often quite tightly resourced because many are not for profit. So I think it takes a very well-rounded individual who has all those management skills, but certainly diplomacy and great communication skills and people skills are probably the most important thing I'd say aspiring leaders should get, and a very thick skin.
Well, the only advice I would give is the advice that was given to me, and I think it was an extremely good piece of advice. If you want to be successful in this sector, then you must spend as much time as possible focusing on the people who employ your members. I regard them as my customers. And the piece of advice is, if the chief executive of every organisation who employs your members will take your telephone call when you ring him or her, then you will be successful.